Yo, what up, TCK Potters? Sky and Lukas back with you. We are breaking down the tight ends this time around. If you missed our episode on Tuesday, it was the wide receivers and, of course, last week, quarterbacks and running backs as well. It's a free agency breakdown on every position, fantasy relevant at least. Make sure you go and tune into those previous episodes. Lukas, how we doing today, man?
All right, so two things. Yes, one of these tight ends is going to be playing with Tom Brady next year. Let's just get that out of the way. We'll tell you who that's going to be in this episode. And the other one is one of these tight ends will be replacing Jordan Reed finally. He will not be in the top 10 in ADP anymore. So we will get into this.
Oh, man, we're off to a hot start. Jordan Reed, there is a guy that kind of carried fantasy teams for – it seemed like a decade, but it was probably about 3 years.
It's because he's still – every year he's like top 10 ADP. It's because the tight end position sucks. So every year it happens. And everyone's like, oh, this is the year. And then before even like halfway through the offseason, injured out for the whole rest of the year.
The best thing about Jordan Reed, man, was definitely – not that I wish injuries on anybody. I don't. But him getting hurt and leaving room for my boy Vernon Davis, who of course – now he's retired. But the OG 49ers definitely appreciate some Vernon Davis, who allowed Alex Smith to actually have a career in San Francisco. Anyway, let's move on. I think that's about 2 minutes more Jordan Reed than I thought we were going to talk about today, but I appreciate you.
Me too.
Turning back the clock a little bit. Let's jump right into it, man. Austin Hooper, first tight end free agent to discuss. 75 catches, 787 yards, 6 touchdowns. He'll be 25. Hooper has improved across the board in each of his first 4 seasons. He only played 13 games in 2019, but set career highs with 97 targets, 75 catches, 787 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He was also overshadowed by Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley, of course, but he still managed to finish as the tight end 3 in fantasy points per game and tight end 6 overall, as he did in 2018. The Falcons have not disclosed whether they will re-sign Hooper or not, but I think they would be silly not to, personally. If he does leave, he's going to be the top free agent tight end on the market this year. He won't be without a team for very long. I just read today that owner Arthur Blank was saying that, he's in the discussion. It's just too early, and they do all that owner, coaches, general manager speak this time of year where they don't know, blah, blah, blah. They all know what the fuck they're going to do. They just don't tell us yet. But he did mention that Austin Hooper's in the mix. I think they'd be foolish to let him go. He's young. He's a fucking stud. He's a red zone threat. He's got wheels. He's made big plays. He's a perfect complement for Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley, for Matt Ryan. I think he really rounds out that passing game for the Falcons. One of my favorite tight ends in the league, quickly creeping into that top 3 discussion every year. If he leaves Atlanta, I think he goes immediately to New England. What can you add about Austin Hooper?
So I was all aboard the returning of the Falcons train until I realized they don't have any money. They are sitting at $6 million cap right now. They're going to clear some of that up by getting rid of Vic Beasley, which they already stated they are. And they just recently stated that they are going to get rid of Devonta Freeman.
Yep.
But this is the year now that they have the out in the contract, if you want to call it. So right now they can cut him for $6 million dead cap. Whereas if they wait next year, it's about $9.5 million. So obviously that's more. So this is the year they're going to do it. But if they cut him, they're sitting at no money. Like, right, if you just take that money away. So they're going to have to work something out. I don't know where that's going to happen. I don't know who they can get rid of because, like we mentioned last episode with Devonta Freeman being a free agent, they are in a win-now window as much as it didn't seem like it was last year. So I don't know how this is going to happen for the money situation. Obviously, they could tag him. I don't know if Hooper wants that because obviously we know tight ends don't stay very long at the top in the league. So I don't know. It's just hard to tell. So this is where I said I'm going to come out and say it, Redskins, because Ron Rivera is now the coach of the Redskins, and he saw firsthand from him twice a year how he plays on the Panthers.
I like that.
So I think, like I said, he's going to replace Jordan Reed. And if Jordan Reed somehow stays healthy and you have a Hooper-Jordan Reed duo to help out your lack of receiver talent, I think it's just too good to be true. And I think if he goes with the Redskins, I think his value goes up, honestly. Just he's going to get way more targets. Rivera's going to know how to get him the ball underneath, which is huge for PPR. Yeah, he has Haskins, but, I mean, Haskins would benefit more at the tight end than he would with a receiver throwing the ball downfield. So I think Redskins is ultimately where he falls. I don't think the Patriots have the money after they get Brady back to kind of throw the contract he might want. So I really like the Redskins in this spot, but I could see the Falcons somehow working it out to get it back after what he did last year, because he was the tight end one, I think, in the first 8 weeks or something. So he definitely proved himself last year.
Yeah, he was smashing. And, if Julio or Calvin Ridley go down, I mean, he just skyrockets up. I totally agree with pretty much all of your takes. I feel like with Freeman inevitably leaving Atlanta, it seems like them probably going young, rookies, whatever. I think they'll be just fine and save some money there, and they can sign him back to see what happens. It just makes too much sense for Atlanta. If he does leave, I mean, we already talked about quarterbacks, and we discussed Tom Brady last week, so we're not going to go into that too deep. But money-wise, the Raiders have come out and said they basically potentially want to give him $60 million, whatever. The Patriots essentially are about half that. So we'll see what happens with that signing. The Patriots need a tight end. We saw how dominant they were for a decade with Gronkowski. I'm not saying Austin Hooper's necessarily Gronkowski, but
He's
he
better
could
than
be.
Benjamin Watson. I mean, like,
he could
yeah,
be.
like, I
If he could be if he was in New England. I don't hate the Redskins take actually, but I kind of want to. We're gonna get into Greg Olsen later in this episode. We'll discuss this a little bit deeper, so I won't spill the beans too much. But he's been in touch with the Redskins as well, with his old coach Ron Rivera in Carolina, now in Washington, obviously. So a lot of moving parts. Ultimately, I think Austin Hooper stays in Atlanta. Ultimately, what do you think happens with him?
I'm gonna go Redskins. I'm feeling good about that one. And I guess I'll give my take for Greg Olsen, kind of going against kind of the crowd on that one. But I think Redskins fall back. Definitely the Falcons. They'll make it happen somehow.
Deal. All right, let's move on here. Another big name, of course, Hunter Henry. Both of these guys were kind of in that 4, 5, 6. The second three, the second big three, I guess you could call it, for fantasy last year, with of course Evan Ingram and my boy OJ Howard, who everybody picked in the 4th round. Yikes. Anyway, Hunter Henry, 55 catches, 652 yards, 5 touchdowns, also just 25. Henry, along with Hooper, will be one of the top options this year and a stud tight end if he leaves the Chargers. Henry's issues, as fantasy owners know all too well, unfortunately, is his injury history. He's yet to play 16 games in his 4 seasons, including missing all of 2018 with a torn ACL and another 4 games last year with a knee fracture. His production, when healthy, is on par with the top 3 tight ends in the league, and he's basically can't produce consistently with these injuries. That's the biggest flaw with Henry, of course. He's yet to surpass 55 receptions, 660 yards in a season, and had 8 touchdowns as a rookie with Antonio Gates in the mix. So we know that the upside is certainly there for Hunter Henry and his potential, his talent, his speed, everything else. A promising note for Henry was that his first 2 games back in 2019 after the knee fracture resulted in 8 catches, 100 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then the next week, 6 catches and 97 yards before playing the rest of the season for the Chargers. So obviously he came back and bounced back strong off of injury. They're still young, which helps a lot with injuries. Like most of the players in the NFL, if he stays healthy, he could be a premier option at his position. Losing Rivers is definitely going to shake things up for the Chargers, but if they got, let's say, Tom Brady, who's a similar but better quarterback, I think, at this point, than Phillip Rivers, or a rookie taken, I think he'll be a nice safety blanket, similar to my take with Melvin Gordon when we discuss running backs. He also fills out that tight end position with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams on the outside, and a stable of versatile backs there for the Chargers. So, again, just like Austin Hooper, he's going to make a great asset to any team that he goes to if he leaves L.A. But to me, I don't think they're going to find a better position at tight end right away. And with all the other options there right now for the Chargers, he just makes the most sense to stay. I think he stays in L.A., and I think both of these guys return back home for 2020.
Yeah, I think that last point you said, that he just automatically makes the team – that next level, is huge. It is true. Like, you look at, let's just list off teams that need a tight end: Patriots, Bears, Chargers, Falcons. I mean, like, because obviously the Chargers and Falcons don't have a tight end right now, so they both need a tight end. There's a ton of teams that could use a tight end. Bills ultimately could. Dawson Knox is good, but I don't think he's the next level tight end. So you look at teams that I think are actually going to be in the running. I think Bears, Chargers, Falcons, I think are going to be Hooper or nothing. And I think the Patriots. And I think the Chargers, Patriots, and Bears are all in contention for Hunter Henry. The team that needs one the most, I think, is the Bears. So I'm going to put in the Bears for Hunter Henry. Because if you look at not this year but last year, Trey Burton was fantasy relevant. He was not good. He was just fantasy relevant because they used him. He was hurt last year. We saw a drop-off. Obviously, that's not why the Bears were bad. They just didn't have a tight end or whatever. But just having that athletic profile player on top of Allen Robinson, Anthony Miller, Matt Nagy, offensive genius, that just boosts the team so much more and gets them back into that playoff stint, I think. And you can I think this is the one position where these guys are going to get locked up, making tight ends in the draft worthless because at this point they are. I barely watch any film on it because they just kind of suck. No one's really that great. So I think that the Bears ultimately get Hunter Henry, but I don't think the Chargers are far off. I think it's pretty even. Kind of like what we mentioned, if they get a rookie quarterback, we think the Chargers might get both guys back because that's what's best for the rookie. Kind of the same thing with Hunter Henry. They might just load everything back up on offense and say, here, Justin Herbert, go for it. Because he is a pro-ready quarterback. He could do it. I think Hunter Henry's a key point to that sort of outlook kind of for both the Chargers and the Bears. So I think one of those teams is the two that will land him.
Love it. I think that was a great breakdown. I'm gonna leave it there. Let's move on to Eric Ebron. 31 catches, 375 yards, 3 touchdowns. Still somehow 26 years old.
Yeah.
Before I went down for the break, I thought Eric Ebron was 34 or so, but he's not. Good news, folks. He's still only 26 somehow. Ebron was every fantasy analyst's favorite regression candidate at the tight end position in 2019, and that's because he scored a ridiculous 13 receiving touchdowns in 2018. He also ran one in, believe it or not, and set career highs across the board. Many factors led to that, such as Doyle and T.Y. missing time and not having another quality receiving option for Indianapolis aside from Eric Ebron himself. All those analysts were spot on, of course, as Ebron's numbers were cut in half in targets, receiving yards, receptions, and the biggest drop of all was the touchdown production, where he went from 13 receiving to 3. Yes, you heard that correctly. That's 10 less touchdowns for Eric Ebron. Ebron has crazy talent, and he's huge, 6'4", 250, but other than his outlier season in 2018, he has yet to collect more than 65 receptions, 600 yards, or 5 touchdowns. His potential is still through the roof, but he hasn't really tapped outside of that in 2018. We'll see where he lands in 2020 as GM for the Colts. Ballard, who I know Lukas likes a lot, has already mentioned that he'll probably move on from Eric Ebron, and there will be plenty of interest, of course, again, for a huge body who has all the talent, just hasn't really put it together so far. Similar conversation probably to Hooper and Henry in where he could land, his asset to the team, an immediate spark to the offense, big red zone target, all this shit. The difference is I think Hooper and Henry could definitely stay put in Atlanta and LA. Ebron is going to leave the Colts. That being said, where do you see they drop him?
Well, first off, to start, I'm very thankful that now every week on the podcast, you will not have to ask me if I want to play Eric Ebron or Jack Doyle. I'm thankful for that because I never had an answer for that question. This player screams the Patriots for me. I
Totally
just see
agree.
it. He's just he's good. He's literally – I could see him being a top 5 fantasy tight end easily post-signing, and I think that will stick. If he goes to the Patriots and Brady returns, I'm going to be all on board, but to a certain extent, ADP, all that stuff's going to matter, so we'll break that down as we go. But I think that'd be huge because he's not coming in asking for 7 to 8 targets a game. He's like, here, I'm going to go block, and then you're just going to give me the ball in the red zone, and I'm going to go to work. Obviously, we saw that 2 years ago when he had 14 touchdowns or 15, whatever you said. And obviously he regressed, but yeah, it was Brissett. The team kind of, I don't want to say gave up after Luck retired, but there was definitely a huge letdown. He was injured. They re-signed Jack Doyle because I think that was the better move for them because Jack Doyle fits what they're trying to do on that team. But yeah, I think Patriots, this is just, I don't know. It just seems too good to be true to me if they get Brady back. And that allows them to kind of save some money on Hunter Henry and Hooper and go get A.J. Green, even Amari Cooper, who knows, stuff like that. So I love that placement for him, but I think he could be a good fallback for literally every team we've talked about. Redskins, Chargers, Bears. Like, I think he kind of fits everywhere because he's kind of a one-of-a-kind type of tight end for sure.
Totally. Bills as well. And
Those,
yeah, I totally agree. Ebron has a lot of potential. I think there was just so much hype on him coming out of North Carolina years ago, first rounder with the Lions, and he just never really hit it. Goes with the Colts, obviously explodes. It was 13 receiving touchdowns. He also ran one in on the goal line, so 14 total. That particular season, 2018, Antonio Brown led the NFL with 15 touchdowns, and Devonta Adams and Eric Ebron were tied for second. So pretty incredible season for him, but obviously the regression was ridiculous. I will say this, though. Wherever he goes, Ebron is still, I think, a late-round tight end grab no matter where he ends up, if not earlier. If he's in it, like if he goes to the Patriots, he's gonna be probably top 8 ADP tight ends. I would be sure, just because people would assume he'd be Gronk, which he might be. But if he goes like the Bears or the Bills or something else, I still think he's probably in the top 15 for me, because he's the type of dude who could accidentally catch 10 touchdowns. And we know that with tight ends, if you catch a touchdown every other week, you're going to be a top 6 to 8 tight end. So no matter what, I think he's relevant.
Yeah. Okay. I guess if he goes to the Patriots and Hunter Henry returns, who are you drafting? Say same ADP. We won't count that in yet. Who would you draft straight up?
If Brady is with the Patriots and Ebron goes to the Patriots, I'm going to take Ebron. Because I don't know the quarterback situation. Even if it's my man Jay Herbs for the Chargers, I'm going to take that because of the injury concern with Henry. But that's a very close one as of right now. Now, of course, it's February. All that could change come August. But if you're throwing me in a vacuum right now, I'd probably go Ebron in that particular scenario. If he goes to the Bears or the Bills or whatever, I'm going to ride Henry.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think it's going to be huge for him this year.
Cool. Let's move on. Let's talk about Greg Olsen. We discussed him very briefly when we were mentioning the Redskins earlier. Let's get into it now. Greg Olsen, 52 catches, 597 yards, 2 touchdowns, 35 years old. Olsen is far from his dominant earlier days in his career, but he did bounce back from a number of injuries that derailed 2017 and 18. In 2019, he was a bust for the Panthers. Outside of Christian McCaffrey, I think the entire team somewhat was. And the emergence of DJ Moore definitely helped out. But Cam Newton obviously got hurt, and that kind of changed the entire dynamic of the Panthers in general. Cam Newton isn't a great throwing quarterback. I think we can all agree at this point. Even super-duper Cam Truthers he's a great athlete, but he's not a great thrower. Maybe his shoulder will be a little bit better, but it was horrible the last 2 years. But once he went down, Olsen had to rely on second and third string quarterbacks for the remainder of the season. Carolina and Greg Olsen have already mutually parted ways. So it's not a question of will he leave the Panthers, like all these other free agents. Like, they could still potentially come back. They've already essentially let him go. So the Panthers are moving on. It's a matter of where does he end up. He has already had visits at the time of this conversation with the Redskins, the Bills, and the Seahawks. But there's a note that he also might want to return to Chicago as well. If you're kind of late to the game on Greg Olsen because he's been around so long, he actually started his career with the Bears. Not many people know that because he wasn't super fantasy relevant with the Bears until he went to Carolina. But he did have a number of 4 seasons with the Bears early in his career before joining the Panthers in 2011. We've seen Antonio Gates and Ben Watson play effectively well into their 30s. Olsen could certainly do that in the right position with good health. We've already mentioned the connection with Ron Rivera in Washington, him potentially going back to the Bears as well. We know he's not going back to Carolina. The Bills, the Patriots, same old teams need tight ends. A lot of options here for Greg Olsen, and even though he's old at 35 and beat up the last couple of years, still played pretty well. Doesn't look like he wants to go back to the announcer's booth just yet. Quickly, I guess you said you were going to save your take for Greg Olsen, so I'll give you the floor here. What happens with the seasoned veteran going into 35, 36 years old?
Yeah, the big thing with him is we're going to know ahead of time. No one else has gone on visits or made it clear. Obviously, he can't sign yet, but we're going to know pre-free agency where this man's going because it's more of a life decision for him than just a football decision. Obviously, with the booth, with kind of everything. I mean, he's 35. He's getting there to the point where he probably should be done, but he's just so good he's not done yet. So I think Bears or Redskins, I'm glad you said Bears because I was going to mention that. I think that's where he would – like if he goes somewhere and plays football, he's going to go there. Rivera connection, old team connection. If he goes to the Bears will probably use him and then draft a tight end. If they don't, go get Hunter Henry, which I'm hoping they do. If the Redskins get him, they'll just ride him and Jordan Reed. But ultimately, I think he goes to the booth. I think that it's best for him. The guy we'll talk about later, not on YouTube, but on the podcast, Jason Witten. Hopefully they both take over Booker's job on Monday nights because it is terrible.
Tight end special, baby.
Oh, my gosh. That would be so good for Monday Night Football. Like, oh, that'd be awesome. But, yeah, I think Bears or Redskins or he's retiring. He's not going to keep trying to play, which the part that's weird is both those teams aren't in Super Bowl contender mode. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't think he's going to, I don't know. I don't see him signing with the Redskins just because they suck. Like, I don't think he wants to waste a career there. You could potentially throw a Brady dark horse if they, draft a guy in him or, I don't know, something like that. But, yeah, I think he's a big decision to make. So we will know before the draft or before free agency. I will say that for sure.
I agree. I'm going to throw Rob Gronkowski in the booth as well, and we'll do a trifecta tight ends. My question to you is you have two in the booth, you have one on the field. Who are your two analysts in the booth, and who do you have on the field with all those tight ends?
That's an easy question. Who do you think's on the field?
It's got to be Gronk.
Yeah, it's got to be Gronk because I'm going to, take his shirt off or something, and all the Patriots fans when they're 3-13 next year will be like, oh, this is awesome. Like, that's going to be their only hope in watching football next year.
Shotgunning beers down on the field with Tony Saragusa.
He's like 200 pounds now. He probably doesn't do that.
Dude, that's awesome. That would be a lot of fun. I dig it, man. I'm with you. I think Greg Olsen continues to play another year or two, and I think Redskins just make the most sense with Ron Rivera, even though he does want to go back to Chicago. I think that maturation is going to definitely help. And we just saw that Nagy doesn't quite use the tight end, and that's either because Trey Burton's actually terrible or he just doesn't use the tight end. But nonetheless, Rivera did, and I think he will in Washington. One more name here for the YouTube channel, and then we'll discuss a few more on the podcast. Jacob Hollister, my boy. Hollister, 41 catches, 349 yards, 3 touchdowns, 26 years old. Hollister was traded over to Seattle, from New England, and got a chance to shine when Will Dissly tore his ACL for the Seahawks. Assuming Dissly makes a full recovery, I see Seattle keeping him and Bill Belichick learning from his mistake, releasing Jacob Hollister prematurely, bringing Hollister back to New England, who are in dire need of a pass-catching tight end. I think that'd be the cheapest option, and I feel like Belichick already knows what Hollister can do, saw him actually do it in Seattle, could be the cheapest option to bring him back for the Patriots. We're talking about all these big names going to help Tom Brady, but the reality is if Tom Brady goes to Oakland or anywhere else, it's not going to be the Gronk situation in New England. They're just a regular team. I think Hollister goes back to New England and helps out at that position.
Yeah, he's a utility tight end. We just saw it the way you played. I'm assuming most of America watched Seattle. They were on all the Monday night, Sunday night games. He is not going to be a team's tight end one by any means. Seattle just likes to overpay other players and not have depth at positions. So he will be a wave two. Like we keep saying, the waves is how free agency works. If you actually go and look at it, that's how stuff works. There's waves of tiers of players. He will be a complement to an already starting tight end, I think, or he'll be like a Patriots, and then they go draft one of the top end guys, which, like I said, I don't even know who it is because there's so many players that are just very athletic but very unpolished in this year's draft. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes, but I think Hollister's huge for an NFL team. Like, I think it's just, if you take a step back, the guy can block, he can play fullback. He has reliable hands. He's just going to catch it and get you your first down. Stuff like that works, but that's definitely a Patriots-type player. I think he goes back to Seattle just because I think Pete Carroll knows what they have with him. Will Dissly, yeah, he's good, but he's just kind of injured all the time, or he's never really can put it together. Seattle doesn't really use a big-name tight end, so I think Hollister would just be a good long-term fit for like a 3 or 4 year deal for that team for the future.
If Hollister doesn't go to Seattle and doesn't go to New England, I could see him also landing in New Orleans, actually, to either take over for Jared Cook or be a nice secondary option, as you mentioned. The Bears and the Redskins, of course, we keep mentioning, could also use a reliable tight end. Also the Bills. We haven't talked about the Bills too much, but the Bills were doing pretty well with Charles Clay back in the day with Tyrod Taylor and whatnot, and they don't they don't quite have that tight end. I know Dawson Knox is a name, but I think that he'd be a nice dual threat there. So that'll wrap it up for the YouTube channel. We're going to continue on with a few more names here on the podcast. If you're on the YouTube channel, please make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, let us know about our tight end free agency takes. Make sure you tune into our Instagram and Twitter as well. I'll be writing bios for the players that we've discussed. And make sure you tune on to our podcast for the rest of this episode, wherever you're listening. And until then, YouTube, we'll catch you next time on the TCK Pod.